You've been a bishop now 9 years. So tell me,
Yeah.
what has it been like? What have been your greatest joys, and what have been your greatest challenges, given what's going on in the church? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, if you know anything about the history of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, you know that I was born in the midst of a crisis, the greatest crisis that happened in the history of the Archdiocese. So we, had been in the press for about a week before I got that phone call. Over the Archbishop had been in the press over the dealing
Yeah.
of a couple of priest cases, and we had a kind of perfect storm. We had a chancellor, and she photocopied a bunch of files and quit, and then went to Minnesota Public Radio and brought all those files to Minnesota Public Radio, and they did really months of stories. And so right as that was beginning, it was a week old, and there was a big kind of story brewing about a priest who had been arrested in 2012 for sadly abusing 3 boys. And so right in the middle of that, I got the call to become a bishop. And so the image when I was under papal secret, you're waiting for the announcement and you're going to be a bishop and nobody else does. I was praying with that image of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego right before they go into the fiery furnace. And they say to King Nebuchadnezzar, he says, "Who is the God who will save you from this fiery furnace?" And they say, "Well, we don't know if God will save us, but we know we won't serve your false gods." And so that was really kind of the way I entered to be a bishop. And it was really a full 2 years of crisis. I became the spokesperson for the Archdiocese through that, had to deal with a lot of difficult issues. It all kind of came to a culmination when the Archdiocese was criminally charged in 2015. And then the other 2 bishops resigned. And so I was the one guy left. And that's when Archbishop Hebda was named as the administrator to St. Paul, Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And so we were bankrupt at the time. We were under criminal charges. And I had to work with Archbishop Hebda to help bring the Archdiocese out of all that. So I learned my way around the sexual abuse crisis in a very kind of baptism by fire sort of way. And, there was a lot of dark days in those first couple of years. I didn't have anything to do with the chancery before I became a bishop. So I didn't have anything to do with getting us into that situation, but I was just the one who God put there to try to help get us out of it. And I learned a lot about God's faithfulness and God's goodness, and that if you're a man of principle and you try to follow those principles, and that God will work. And really learned a lot about the importance of my prayer life. I already had a good prayer life, but I know I wouldn't have made it if I didn't have a prayer life during that time. But the other thing I learned is about the goodness of God's people. I thought when I first became a bishop, because the Archdiocese, the press was so bad, I thought when I go to parishes, people are going to yell at me, I didn't know what was going to happen. And people were always so good to me. And God's people are so faithful, and they love the church. They love the Eucharist. And they really are able to see beyond sort of the crisis, to see that God is still God, and he still works, and the church is still needed. And so I experienced that kind of wonder in spades, and just God providing the things that I needed in order to help walk through what were, certainly in the most difficult years of my life.